People noticed her before they noticed anything else. Before the hum of the engines. Before the scent of coffee drifting from the galley. Before the low, impatient murmurs of passengers settling into their seats. She was already there, sitting in first class, not moving much, not talking, not doing anything that demanded attention. And yet, attention found her anyway. She sat by the window, seat 2A. The light from outside the terminal filtered in through the oval glass, catching the faint silver strands in her hair. It wasn't styled. It wasn't messy either. Just practical, pulled back neatly, like someone who preferred things to stay where they belonged. Her coat rested on her lap. Old, dark, carefully folded. Not the kind of coat people usually wore in first class. Around her, the cabin was filling with a familiar rhythm of wealth and routine. Leather shoes stepping confidently down the aisle. Watches flashing briefly under cuff sleeves. Soft laughter from people who had flown this way so many times it no longer felt special. A man across the aisle paused as he reached his seat. He looked at the woman, then at the seat number, then back at her. He didn't say anything at first, just frowned slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle that shouldn't have existed. His wife leaned closer. "What is it?" she whispered. He tilted his head toward the woman by the window. "She's in first class." His wife glanced over. Her lips tightened. "Well, maybe she upgraded," she said, though the words didn't sound convincing, even to her. The man shrugged and sat down, but his eyes kept drifting back. So did everyone else's. The woman didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't react. Her hands rested calmly on the coat in her lap. Her fingers were thin, marked with faint lines that spoke of years spent working, holding, carrying things that mattered more than appearances. She wasn't scrolling on a phone. She wasn't wearing headphones. She wasn't pretending not to exist. She simply sat there, waiting. The first flight attendant entered the cabin with a practiced smile already in place. She had done this route dozens of times. She knew the faces, the regulars, the subtle hierarchy that existed even within first class. Her eyes scanned the seats as she walked. Then they stopped, just for a moment. Seat 2A, the woman. The attendant slowed her steps. She checked the seat number again, then the woman's face, then the boarding pass tucked neatly into the seat pocket. Her smile didn't disappear, but thinned. "Good afternoon, ma'am," she said politely. "May I see your boarding pass?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were calm, clear. She reached into the pocket and handed it over without a word. The attendant glanced at it. Then again, her eyebrows lifted, almost imperceptibly. "First class." She hesitated. "Thank you," she said, handing it back. "Just one moment." She turned and walked toward the galley. The whispers began almost immediately. Low, controlled. The kind of whispers people used when they wanted to talk without being accused of talking. A man, too, rose up, leaned toward his companion. "Is she supposed to be here?" Someone else murmured. "Maybe she's in the wrong seat." A quiet laugh followed. The woman by the window remained still. She had heard worse. In the galley, the flight attendant spoke quickly to her colleague. "She's in 2A. So look at her." Her colleague glanced over discreetly. "Oh." The attendant frowned. "Her boarding pass says first class." The colleague shrugged. "Maybe it's a mistake." The attendant didn't answer. She already felt it. That familiar discomfort that came when something didn't fit the invisible rules everyone pretended didn't exist. "I'll get the supervisor," she said. Back in the cabin, more passengers boarded. A man in a tailored suit paused mid-aisle, blocking traffic. "Excuse me," someone snapped from behind him. He waved them off, eyes fixed on seat 2A. "You seeing this?" he said quietly. His colleague smirked. "Yeah, that's bold." Bold isn't the word I'd use. They laughed softly, the sound sharp and brief. The woman by the window adjusted her coat slightly. A small movement. That was all. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. The supervisor arrived a minute later. Older than the attendants. More composed. The kind of person who carried authority without raising her voice. She stood beside seat 2A and smiled professionally. "Good afternoon, ma'am," she said. There seems to be a small issue with your seat. The woman looked up. Yes, she replied. Her voice was soft, but steady. We just need to verify something, the supervisor continued. Would you mind stepping out into the aisle for a moment? The woman didn't answer immediately. She glanced at the aisle, then at the people watching, then back at the supervisor. I'm fine here, she said gently. The supervisor's smile tightened. I understand, but it will only take a moment. The woman shook her head slowly. No, she said. It won't. A ripple of tension passed through the cabin. A man near the front exhaled loudly. Come on, he muttered. We're going to be delayed because of this. Another voice chimed in, louder than intended. She clearly doesn't belong here. The words hung in the air, unchallenged. The woman's eyes flickered just briefly. Not in pain, in recognition. The supervisor straightened. Ma'am, she said, lowering her voice, if there's been an error, we'll need to correct it before departure. The woman's expression didn't change. There's no error, she said. How can you be sure? The woman met her gaze. Because I paid for this seat, she replied, just like everyone else. The supervisor hesitated. I'll need to confirm that, she said. With whom? The woman asked. The supervisor didn't answer. She turned and motioned for another attendant. Phones were coming out now. Not openly. Just enough. The woman stood. Slowly. Not because she was told to. Because she chose to. She stepped into the aisle, coat still folded in her hands. The whispers grew louder. Someone muttered, finally. Another said, about time. The woman didn't respond. She had walked longer aisles than this. Under harsher lights, with heavier eyes on her back. As the supervisor prepared to escort her forward, a voice crackled over the intercom. Hold boarding. The words were calm, authoritative. The entire cabin froze. A second later, the cockpit door opened, and the pilot stepped out. He didn't look at the supervisor. He didn't look at the attendants. He looked straight at the woman standing in the aisle. His face softened. A small smile appeared, one that didn't belong in a conflict. Good to see you again, he said. The silence was absolute. The supervisor turned pale. The passengers stared. The woman inclined her head slightly. It's good to see you too, she replied. The pilot took a step forward. This flight doesn't leave without her, he said calmly. Someone laughed nervously. The pilot didn't. She's exactly where she belongs. No one spoke. No one moved. The woman returned to her seat. C2A. First class. And for the first time since boarding began, no one questioned it. No one in first class said anything out loud. But silence in that cabin was loud. It had a texture, a pressure, a weight that pressed against every leather seat and polished armrest. She could feel it. The woman by the window, still calm, still perfectly upright, knew she was being watched. She didn't need to turn her head. She didn't need to glance around. Years of experience had trained her to sense attention the way others sensed heat. Every stare carried a question. Why is she here? Who does she think she is? Did she make a mistake? Or did we? Across the aisle, a man in his late 40s adjusted his cufflinks for the third time in a minute. Gold. Custom. Subtle but expensive. He worked in private equity. She could tell by the way his eyes calculated value before humanity. He leaned toward his wife and whispered, not quietly enough. Must be someone's assistant who got upgraded. The woman didn't react. 2 rows back, a younger passenger smirked, pulling out his phone, angling it slightly. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to capture content. The kind that would later be titled, "You won't believe who sat next to me in first class." Still, she didn't move. The flight attendant returned, this time with a drink tray. Champagne, she asked the woman, her tone now carefully neutral. Yes, the woman replied. Thank you. Her voice was steady, educated, not rehearsed, lived in. That single word unsettled the cabin more than silence ever could, because it didn't sound like someone asking permission. It sounded like someone accepting what was already theirs. The man in 2A. Seat 2A cleared his throat. He had been watching her since she boarded. Not with curiosity, with recognition. He was older, early 60s, silver hair combed back, posture military straight. His suit wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. People like him didn't wear brands to prove wealth. They wore restraint to signal power. When the woman sat down, his jaw had tightened. Just slightly. Enough. Now, as the champagne glasses clinked, he turned toward her. "You're very calm," he said. Not a compliment. Not a question. An observation. She finally turned her head. Their eyes met. For a split second, something passed between them. Fast, sharp, unspoken. "History. I've had a long morning," she replied. He studied her face as if comparing it to a memory he wasn't sure he wanted to confirm. "You don't look like someone who enjoys flying," he said. "I don't," she answered. "But some destinations are worth the discomfort." That was when his expression changed. Just a fraction. Enough to confirm what she already suspected. He knew who she was. Back in economy. 3 rows from the back of the plane, a young man sat hunched forward, hands clenched between his knees. Evan hadn't stopped sweating since boarding. He wasn't afraid of flying. He was afraid of timing. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The announcement at the gate, the pause, the confusion, the quiet escort forward. "Miss, your seat has been changed." He hadn't seen her face then, only her back, only the way everyone stared as she walked past economy like she didn't belong there, and yet moved as if she did. Now he stared at the seat back in front of him, heart pounding. Because if she was on this flight, then everything he feared was real, and whatever was waiting at the destination wasn't coincidence. The whisper campaign. By the time the plane began taxiing, the whispers had evolved. "She doesn't look rich. She doesn't look poor either. Maybe she married into money. Maybe she stole the seat." A woman in designer sunglasses leaned toward the flight attendant. "Excuse me," she said, smiling too tightly. "Is there some kind of mistake?" The attendant met her eyes, professional and composed. "No, ma'am. All seats are correctly assigned." The woman glanced toward the mysterious passenger again. "Well," she said softly, "it's just unusual." The flight attendant didn't respond, because unusual wasn't against the rules. The first crack. As the plane lifted off, the woman closed her eyes. Not to sleep, to remember. A different cabin, a different flight. Years ago, she had been standing then, not sitting. Standing while a man in a uniform explained, politely but firmly, that she needed to move. "This section is not for you." She had moved without protest. She always did, until she didn't. Now, as the aircraft climbed through the clouds, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not fear, not anger, control, a name spoken too soon. C2A broke the silence again. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "some people would have avoided this flight." She opened her eyes. "Some people don't have the luxury of avoiding things anymore." He nodded slowly. "I thought you disappeared." She met his gaze fully now. "I did," she said. "That was the point." His fingers tightened around his glass. "And yet," he said, "here you are." "Yes," she replied. "Here I am." They held eye contact longer than was polite. Long enough for nearby passengers to notice. Long enough for curiosity to turn into discomfort. Finally, he leaned back. "I suppose," he said, "the past doesn't stay buried forever." She smiled, not kindly. "No," she said, "it doesn't." The plane reached cruising altitude. Seatbelt signs went off. And that was when the real tension began. Because once people believed they were safe, they let their guard down. She didn't. She adjusted the blanket on her lap with deliberate calm, fingers steady, posture relaxed. Anyone watching would assume she was just another passenger finally settling in. Anyone watching closely would notice she hadn't touched her phone. Not once. The envelope. The flight attendant returned. Not the same one as before. This one was older. Sharper eyes. Minimal makeup. The kind of person who noticed details for a living. She stopped beside the woman's seat. "Miss Carter," she said quietly. The name landed like a dropped glass. Sharp. Final. C2A froze. 2 passengers nearby lifted their heads instantly. The woman, Ms. Carter, did not react outwardly. "Yes," she replied. The attendant slipped a thin, cream-colored envelope onto the tray table. "Captain asked me to deliver this to you personally." No announcement. No explanation. Just that. Ms. Carter looked at the envelope. No return address. No logo. Just her name, handwritten. She did not open it immediately. Instead, she looked at the flight attendant. "Thank you," she said. The attendant hesitated, just long enough to be noticeable. Then, softly, he said, "He hopes this time you'll stay until landing." Then she walked away. The shift. C2A slowly exhaled. "You shouldn't be here," he said under his breath. Miss Carter finally opened the envelope. Inside, a single card. Black text. No signature. "We know you're on board. Proceed as planned." That was all. She slid the card back in, folded the envelope, and placed it neatly beside her drink. "Neither should you," she replied. He turned to her sharply now. "You have no idea what you're walking into." She met his eyes, unblinking. "I built it," she said. "I know it better than anyone." Back to Evan. In economy, Evan's phone vibrated. Once. He didn't touch it. Twice. His breath shortened. Third time. He pulled it out, shielding the screen. Unknown number. One message. "She's confirmed. Stay where you are. Do not intervene." His blood went cold. Because no one was supposed to know he was on this flight. No one except. He looked toward the front of the plane. Too far to see her. Too close to pretend she wasn't there. The whispers turned. First class had changed. It wasn't subtle. The curiosity had hardened into something else. Concern. The woman in sunglasses leaned toward her husband again. "That flight attendant used her name," she whispered. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," he said, "and I don't like it." 2 seats ahead, the man who'd been filming earlier had put his phone away. His confidence was gone, because powerful people recognized one thing faster than anyone else. A disturbance they couldn't control. The truth, half-spoken. C2A rubbed his temple. "They buried your case," he said. "They paid you. They silenced you." Miss Carter smiled faintly. "They tried. You signed the agreement." "I signed their version," she replied. "Not mine." He stared at her now, openly alarmed. "You don't understand," he said. "If this goes public—" "It already is," she interrupted calmly. He stiffened. "What?" She leaned in slightly, just enough for him to hear. "By the time this plane lands, there will be 7 sealed files unsealed, 3 emergency board meetings called, and 1 arrest warrant issued." His face drained of color. "That's impossible." She tilted her head. "You always underestimated timing." The announcement. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be making a minor route adjustment due to air traffic control instructions. Our arrival time should remain unchanged." Most passengers barely listened. Miss Carter did. So did seat 2A, because that was not the route they were supposed to take. The look. As the cabin settled again, Miss Carter finally reached for her phone. One message sent. One word. "Begin." Across the aisle, C2A realized something far too late. She hadn't boarded this flight to arrive somewhere. She had boarded it to make sure no one else could leave the same way. The plane turned slightly. Not enough for most passengers to notice. Enough for those who knew the route by heart. C2A noticed immediately. "This isn't air traffic," he said. Miss Carter didn't look up. "No," she replied. "It's containment. The reason for first class." People always thought first class was about luxury. Legroom, champagne, privacy. That was the lie. The truth was simpler. First class was about control. Fewer people, fixed seating, clear passenger manifests, priority surveillance, faster response if something went wrong. And most importantly, no easy exits. Miss Carter had chosen this seat for the same reason a chess player sacrificed a queen. Not because it was safe, because it forced the game to end. The file that never died. C2A leaned back, eyes fixed forward. "They ruled it an accident," he said. "A systems failure. No human liability." "Yes," she answered. "On paper." She tapped her phone once. On the screen, a photo. A manufacturing floor. Men in identical uniforms. A safety override switch, rewired. Another tap. An internal email chain. Redacted names. One visible signature at the bottom. H.R. Collins. C2 as jaw tightened. That was sealed. "For the public," she said. "Not for the dead." Flashback. The day everything broke. The factory alarm screamed for 6 full minutes. No evacuation order. No shutdown. Because the override had been disabled to save costs. 14 workers died. 3 more survived. One of them testified. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She described the smell first. Burned plastic. Hot metal. Hair. The board called her emotional. The court called the evidence inconclusive. The media called it unfortunate. Ms. Carter called it murder. Why she disappeared. You vanished, C2A said. We thought you broke. She almost laughed. No, she said softly. I recalculated. She left the country. Changed her name. Worked in silence. For the same companies that buried her case. Compliance systems. Risk modeling. Legal exposure forecasting. She learned how disasters were predicted. And more importantly, how they were hidden. They paid you millions, he said. They paid me to fix their future mistakes, she replied. I used it to expose their past ones. Economy, Evan understands. Evan's phone vibrated again. Another message. Target confirmed. Row 2. Primary subject aware. His hand shook, because now he understood. This wasn't about her safety. It was about ensuring someone else couldn't escape accountability. He looked around. Regular passengers. Regular lives. None of them knew they were flying inside a legal trap, closing in real time. The man who realizes too late. C2, it lowered his voice. You can still stop this, he said. You always could. She finally turned fully toward him. Her eyes were calm. Clear. You're confusing mercy with hesitation, she said. His phone buzzed. He looked down. One missed call. Then another. Then a third. From the same number. The company's internal crisis line. He didn't answer. He already knew. The second announcement. The captain spoke again. Ladies and gentlemen, for operational reasons, we'll be landing slightly earlier than scheduled. Please remain seated. Earlier? That wasn't possible. Unless. C2A looked at her, panic breaking through. You coordinated this with authorities. With auditors, she corrected. And prosecutors. Authorities come later. You planned this for months. For years. The final confirmation. Ms. Carter's phone lit up one last time. A single notification. Warrant issued. Hold upon landing. She locked the screen. Finished her water. And folded her hands. Across the aisle, C2A understood the final cruelty of it all. He wouldn't be arrested in an office. Or a courtroom. Or surrounded by lawyers. He would be arrested in first class. In front of people who once admired him. Because humiliation, she believed, was part of justice. The look that ends it. He whispered, almost pleading, You destroyed everything. She stood slowly as the seatbelt sign came back on. No, she said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already destroyed. The plane began its descent. The wheels touched the runway without drama. No sudden jolt. No applause. No one screamed. Just a smooth landing. Like nothing important was about to happen. And that was the point. The silence before everything changed. Passengers checked their phones. A woman adjusted her scarf. A man stretched his legs. Someone laughed quietly 2 rows back. Normal. Too normal. Ms. Carter remained seated. Hands folded. Back straight. Eyes forward. She didn't look at C2A anymore. She didn't need to. He was breathing too fast now. The man who used to control rooms. C2A had once commanded rooms with a single sentence. Boardrooms. Courtrooms. Press conferences. Now, he couldn't even control his own hands. They trembled slightly on the armrest. You won't win, he whispered. Even if they take me, they'll replace me. Ms. Carter didn't turn. That's why I didn't aim at you, she said. He froze. The real target. You think this was about one arrest? She continued calmly. This flight was about evidence becoming public in a place where it couldn't be delayed. She finally met his eyes. By the time we reached the gate, the stock market will already know. His phone vibrated violently. Once. Twice. Again. He looked and went pale. What the phone said. Trading halted. Emergency board meeting. Media requesting comment. Then the final message. Who gave him the files? He looked up at her slowly. You burned the whole structure. She nodded once. Structures built on silence deserve fire. Economy class, Evan watches history. Evan felt the shift before he saw it. The tension, the air thickening. Three men in plain clothes stood at the front of the cabin as the seatbelt sign remained on. They didn't rush. They didn't announce themselves. They waited. Professionals always did. First class stands still. The lead officer stepped forward. "Mr. Collins," he said evenly, "please remain seated." Every head in first class turned. Some recognized the name. Some didn't. But everyone understood one thing. This wasn't random. This was precise. Mr. Collins tried to stand. His knees failed him. The moment that became the title. As officers spoke quietly, one passenger finally whispered, "Who is that woman?" Another replied, barely audible, "She's the reason he's here." Miss Carter rose slowly. Not escorted. Not rushed. She stepped into the aisle with the calm of someone who had already paid every price. As she passed Evan's row, he looked up. Their eyes met. Just for a second. She smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just complete. The last line that mattered. At the aircraft door, an officer stopped her. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "we may need your statement." She nodded. "I'll be available," she replied. "I always am." Then she stepped onto the jet bridge. Free. Aftermath. What the world never saw. That evening, the company's shares collapsed. 3 executives resigned. 2 more were charged weeks later. The case was called historic. Analysts called it unexpected. The media called her a mystery. She never corrected them. The final truth. First class was never about comfort. It was about position. And sometimes, the quiet woman in the front row isn't there to escape the world. She's there to end a lie.